Hello, economics students. Today we have a lot of information that we're going to be covering. I recommend that you actually open the PowerPoint or actually, listen along. If you want to take notes, you can. You can use your notes in the test. But today we're going to be looking at the types of economies there are. And there's actually quite a bit of information on today's presentation. So in these cartoons below, we're just looking at an example of a store that might be from something that we call a capitalist economy versus a command economy. In one place, we have so many things that we don't even know what to choose, and in fact, it's the customer that gets to choose. On the other hand, in the bottom picture, we can see that there is a lot of paper towel, but we might not have as many other options. So which store would you prefer to shop in? So first of all, the goals of economies are to answer three basic economic questions. Number one, what should be produced? Number two, how should these goods and services be produced? And number three, who's going to consume the goods and services? And like I have here, our economy is sort of like a puzzle. We need to put together the pieces and figure out how we're going to answer those questions. So there are social goals in an economy. Economic efficiency is something we've already talked about with the production possibilities curve. Are we using our resources to the maximum potential? Economic equity means, is the economy accessed evenly across people's, regardless of their race or their income level? Or other factors that might separate them, gender, etc. Do we have economic freedom? In other words, is it important that we as a society are able to produce what we want to produce, with whom and how? Economic growth, do we want to continue seeing the economy grow? Do we want it to be secure, or do we want to take risks? And do we want it to be stable? So these are all social goals of an economy. And how economies work in particular countries around the world depends a little bit on what their ultimate goals are. So two influential economic thinkers were Adam Smith and Karl Marx. Adam Smith wrote in the 1700s about something called the invisible hand, and he believed that by leaving economies to themselves, people will pursue their self-interest and the economies will work to their very best. Karl Marx was a thinker who was very concerned about the abundance that people he called the proletariat, or sorry, the bourgeoisie had over the proletariat, the workers, and he felt that there had to be a system in which the economy would be more equitable. Both of these were really, really important economists and have led to our political and economic climate even to this day. So first of all, on the one hand, the Adam Smith side of things, people work for their own self-interest, and they're guided as if by an invisible hand to use the resources efficiently and achieve maximum good for society. This is called laissez-faire economics. Let people do as they choose. On the other hand, in the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx talked about capitalism and the bourgeoisie, the owners of the factories, benefited at the expense of the workers. So his work actually led to the unification of groups of people who would be considered the workers, leading massive revolutions in Russia and in other parts of the world, supposedly to bring equality back to the classes, but it didn't always work out for the best. When we talk about economies, we tend to think of them on a continuum. So a true market economy barely exists in this world. So government has very, very little control. And this was Adam Smith's idea with the invisible hand. You basically just let markets do what they want, and ultimately that will work out for the good of everyone. There are very few economies that are pure command economies, which is communism. The closest would be North Korea. We know that they very much have a command economy in which the government makes most of the decisions about how to answer those three economic decisions. So let's talk about two basic economic systems. First of all, free market. This is when individuals or private organizations make economic decisions. In what ways is America an example of a country with a free market economy? Just think about that for a second. If it consumers start buying a bunch of masks because of the pandemic, the amount of mask wearing and production will go up. If consumers decide that they like this particular brand of stapler, and they start buying it and they start buying it out, well, then this company is likely going to increase the production of staples. So, to a large part, we are a free market economy. However, we do have some governmental controls about safety and sometimes about production quality, working conditions, etc. Going back to Adam Smith and the invisible hand, according to this theory, the market will automatically reward efficient behaviors and decisions. So, an example of this is if people are willing to pay more money for safer cars, car companies will produce them without being forced by law. I just bought a new car this year, and it does have a lot of safety features, and they aren't, necessary. I didn't have to buy a car with these safety features. They are not being required, the ones that I got. Some of them are. The leave airbags are not required. But yeah, I wanted a safer car. I wanted a four-wheel drive car. I wanted a car that would handle well in Minnesota weather. So that's how Adam Smith suggested that the economy would work with the invisible hand. Kind of along with the command economy idea is something called laissez-faire, which means from French for leave alone. So in laissez-faire economies, the government doesn't regulate the economy and it just kind of works on its own. Now, again, we don't have a completely market economy. And in fact, in recent months, there have been stimulus checks sent out to families in order to try to grow the economy or to keep it from shrinking more than it did already. So strengths and weaknesses of capitalism. Strengths, it is pretty efficient. The invisible hand does work pretty well. We are free to produce what we want, and you know what? If people don't buy it, people don't make it. So it works itself out. It leads to economic growth, and one thing that really is an important strength of capitalism is it leads to innovation. If people are willing to innovate and they know that they can take a risk and potentially have a market for it, we're going to have better quality products. And this even, applies to something like medicines or medical devices and things like that. It can be inequitable. This is one of the problems. Not everyone can have resources to the products that are made available by inequality or by inequity, and it can be unpredictable, such as it has been in this last year. So government in the free market, what does it do? For the most part, it's supposed to let the economy do what it wants. But it does get a little involved. It tries to help make sure that the market is a fair place to compete. So in other words, it has made it illegal for monopolies to occur, where one company gets in a position where they own all of the resources of a particular market. The government also makes international trade negotiations and deals to decide through tariffs and other kinds of economic decision making how much we'll negotiate with other countries and with what kind of products. They do want to try to prevent another Great Depression, and this is why during the Great Depression, President Roosevelt did institute a number of economic stimulus things, including like the Civilian Conservation Corps and other more social programs to help people to survive during that time, and to look after those who cannot work. So we have a system in the United States called Social Security Disability Income. This is something that I have a nephew that benefits from because he is unable to work, and he still gets an income so that he can survive. Another aspect of government in the free market is the Federal Reserve. Now, there are 12 districts and 13 members of the Federal Reserve Board. And man, the Fed has some crazy power. They control interest rates. The interest rates are hovering near 0% right now. The idea is that when the interest rates are low, people are more likely to borrow money and therefore stimulate the economy. The government also creates laws to try and make the market fair. And I already talked about that a little bit with things like controlling monopolies. Another thing they do is it gives licenses to some companies and not others. So licenses, for example, if you go to get your hair cut, a stylist and a shop needs to have a license to show that they are following proper cleaning protocols, and that they are doing things in a way that is for the health and benefit of the public that it serves. And it gives jobs, money, and health care to some that need it. I personally, as a teacher, am basically employed by the government. My pay comes from the tax of both our community as well as national tax base and state tax base. I'm going to have you watch this on a separate link. Okay, so the next kind of economy is a command economy. This is a central body, such as the government, that makes economic decisions. And so I have here, in what ways is an American example of a country with a command economy, but there are some things that the government does make economic decisions about. This is especially true with something like the military. The government makes decisions about how much spending we'll do on the military and how much technology and innovation we'll invest in the military. I've put up a flag here of North Korea, and as you can see, it is flanked by barbed wire. North Korea is probably considered to be the most isolated command economy in the world at this point in time. And the central government makes all of the decisions about what should be produced, how it should be produced, how it should be distributed. Now, socialism and communism are both types of command economies, but they're slightly different in the way that they are carried out. Many countries of Western Europe are considered to be socialist, such as like Denmark. But it's based on the idea that democratic means some freedoms should be used to help distribute the wealth evenly. So in Denmark, and I just happen to know a little bit about Denmark because I have family that lives in Denmark. There is the wealth gap is quite a bit less than it is here in the United States, with still a high quality of living. They have health care provided to them by the government, and however, they still have some freedoms as far as the economic decision making that they do. Communism, on the other hand, this is where all economic and political power rests with the central government. So you may or may not recall from your history lessons that, when Stalin and Lenin were in control of Russia, Stalin in particular made a lot of decisions just unilaterally about what should be produced. Some examples of command economies: we have Cuba, North Korea, and Iran are currently the economies that are pretty centralized, pretty well government controlled. Russia, when it was leading the Soviet Union, had been pretty much a command economy, and its economy is changing in certain ways. China is still a command economy to a great extent. However, more free market ideas have been introduced in recent years. After Mao was out of power and Deng Xiaoping came into power in the 1980s, China started opening up a lot to the world and has more free market ability than it did back in the era of Mao. Strengths and weaknesses of command economies. They're said to be equitable. True equity is hard to achieve, however. They're said to be secure and predictable. You know what the government's going to produce. Weaknesses, they're restrictive. If there's somebody that wants to produce something, they have an idea, they're an entrepreneur, they can't necessarily do it. Overall, they're less productive. As it turns out, people are really motivated by the incentives that they get to be able to produce something on their own, to be able to innovate, to be able to get a patent, to be able to earn money by doing so. Um, this is another video that I'm going to attach. And then other types of economies. I had said two before, but we've got the mixed economy, one that combines elements of command and free market economies. And this is basically almost every country in the world. We have a mixed economy, even though we would call ourselves capitalists. But a traditional economy, there are very few countries like this. This is where they would do direct trade. So, if we go way back in history, you trade silk for tea or whatever. So Chad might be a country with a traditional economy. They don't have a currency. However, there are very few countries like that in the world today. So those are the types of economies that there are. This is Learning Target 1E, so you should be able to complete that by the end of the day on Tuesday. All right, thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye.